Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's QE Babble. First of all, sorry for being slightly late. My apologies. That was completely my fault. Today, we're going to be talking about quality coaching, and we're going to focus on the role of the quality coach and really what one is. So having someone within your QE setup whose job it is to mentor, support, and empower engineers is rising in popularity. More and more companies see the value in having someone deployed to be a true advocate for quality, often leading the guild or community of practice and helping others develop. Also, in an agile setup, there is sometimes a group of QEs who don't report directly to a head of quality or test manager. It might be that QEs are now directly reporting to different people, for example, development or engineering managers, or perhaps even directly to the CTO. So if you're choosing not to have a leader of quality, whose job is it to coach, empower, develop, and advocate across the business? So today we wanted to really shine a light on the role of a quality coach. And to do that, we've been busy talking to some of the most prominent figures within that kind of space. And I'm thrilled that three of them have agreed to give up some of their time to talk to us about their thoughts and views on coaching. So a massive welcome to Vernon, Richard, and Sane. Hello, everyone.
And Chris.
Hey.
And Chris. Sorry, my gosh, the bad start, wasn't it? Thanks for joining us all. Chris, as I omitted you there, let me start with you. Do you want to just give us a brief introduction and tell us your views on what a quality coach is?
Sure, yeah. So, I'm Chris, or Christopher, as I liked it written down. I'm currently a senior quality coach at the co-op or for the co-op, and also run my own coaching business called Growth Punks. In terms of what a quality coach is, I've been in a really nice position in the past to introduce quality coaching at a number of businesses, and delighted to join the co-op and see that they're doing such a good job. So to me, quality coach is less of a tester doing a thing at the end, more of an advocate at the upfront, helping enable a team to deliver a product that, we like to say that quality is baked in. I kind of like to look at it as you're ensuring that the team are putting all those things in place, like a duty of care for, not only your customers, but other teams that interact with your code as well. So a bit of a rambling answer for you.
Not at all. Vernon, over to you. Welcome.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Vernon, based in the UK. I currently work for Ada, where I have the best job title in the history of job titles. Check this out, people. I'm a senior expert quality engineer. Check that out. That's right. You may all bow and salute when you see me. And then outside of that, similar to Chris, I do some consulting and also do some training and hosting of stuff and try and share things on the internet. My definition of quality coach, I think I emphasize the coach part of that job title. So it's around helping the team solve their own testing and quality problems rather than have me do it or the testing specialist do it. So that's what I think that's about.
Okay, thank you. Sane? Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sanne. My interest in quality coaching, I think, stemmed from the fact that I started realizing that classical test manager jobs are not covering quite that aspect, that we want teams to be autonomous and we want teams to set their own goals for quality. And to enable that, I started reading up on quality coaching, which seems to fit that gap that I was seeing in the teams I was managing. So I'm still, I would say, in transition from a classical role into this quality coaching role. But I think it is where the future lies for me and my future consultancy work. So very keen to join this conversation today.
Good, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for the introductions and that brief outline of what you think a coach is. I want to kind of delve in, if we can, to some of the specifics of what a coach actually physically, or not physically, but what they do, what their role involves. So what kind of process do you undertake to support the engineers? Vernon, can I come to you on that one? So, in practice, how do you support engineers in their work?
I would say so. What I like to do is I like to try and understand what's going on. So I've been on the receiving end of inflicting help, like somebody joins a team and like saying, I am the great and glorious software tester. I know everything and I'm just going to tell you what to do. Usually that isn't the case and advice is suboptimal in some way, shape or form. So what I try to do is listen a lot and observe a lot and try and understand the context. And then that helps me understand. The first thing I want to do is like build some credibility and trust with people. So I try and help solve some problems that are important to the people in the team. And then once it feels like I'm starting to build that trust and that credibility with people, then I can start to offer suggestions. That's very general. Sometimes it is appropriate to just dive in and start telling you, we need to do this, do this. Sometimes that is appropriate, but generally speaking, I don't like to do that. So that is I've got a very unsophisticated way of looking at it. I'm basically trying to make my teammates look as awesome as possible. Is basically it. One of my colleagues, James Thomas, just sent me a blog post he wrote recently where he described how he sees it. And I'll try and dig out the link and share it with you, Matt, so you can share it with everyone.
That'd be good.
Because he has a really nice definition of it. But that's how I look at it.
So just delve into that before we move on to talk to Chris. So are these is this support project specific or is it more process orientated? So do you get involved? Are you getting involved in the specifics of the work they're delivering, or is it the way they're doing the work, or both?
It's team specific, so it's both.
Okay.
I would say it's team specific. It's specific to the people in that whichever team or structure delivering whatever piece of work, whether it's we own a part of the architecture or we own a part of the business solution from cradle to the grave, or whether it's a specific project with a definitive start and a definitive end. That kind of doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Oh, Chris, how does it look from your angle? So where do you start to get involved as a coach?
It can be team, it can be project. At the moment, I'm floating between teams and helping where needed. But most recently, I've been looking at a team that was newly formed and that had some good ideas about what good quality looked like, but hadn't put those into practice yet. So it's very much what I like is that every team is at a different level of maturity. So the job's always different. You're never going in and sometimes you're, like to Vernon's point, sometimes you have to be a bit more explicit and you're more of a mentor, whereas other times you're sort of just nudging things in the right direction and making sure that the conversations happen. So I've been on various teams where you're starting from scratch and the team don't know what a quality coach is. They might not even be writing unit tests, for instance, that kind of thing. Whereas I've also been on very mature teams where it's almost like they don't need a full-time quality coach, which is a nice position. And almost a bit like a scrum master in that if you've done your job really well, we'll come to you as and when it's needed rather than in every meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if it's a team, like for example, of if you're supporting a team of sort of 5 quality engineers, but they're all particularly senior, maybe some of them are at like principal level. How does that differ to perhaps a team of people who are relatively new to the industry?
A team of quality coaches, did you say?
Sorry. I mean, so if you're as a coach, if you're supporting a team of quality engineers, but they're all relatively senior, how does your sort of approach or style differ in that instance to perhaps a team of people who are really junior?
Yeah, so for me, typically there aren't quality engineers; they're quality coaches these days. So, and that way they can add more value from the off. They're not they're not trying to add tests towards the end of a process. They're making sure the conversations happen up front, and they're helping the team, bake quality in. So
Okay.
When it comes down to experience, typically we're working with engineers that there seems to be a trend where, there's some unit testing covered in their training, but otherwise testing is something that's quite alien to a lot of developers. I hope that's not the case where from other people's experience, but from my experience across the industry, it's been very much I had a developer tell me recently that they were unit test aware, which was I tried not to laugh, but it was also I tried not to cry. So you're working with people that aren't necessarily aware of what good testing looks like in the first place, and then trying to get them involved in testing activities as a team rather than having a dedicated testing person in that team, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
And Matt, if I can jump in on that, if that's okay, because I think the question you were asking is what's different when guiding or coaching more senior quality engineers. One thing I find, the more senior they are, the more I'm able to not coach on the technical side of things. They know what testing is, they know how to engineer, and they've got a pretty good relationship with their team. We work more on things like visibility, even more practical sense, like writing business cases for the experiments they want to run or the proofs of concepts. It becomes a lot about managing up, if that almost makes sense, because they've got the technical side down. But that's a factor that when you are trying to get that team autonomy in and you've got that role as an expert, it doesn't automatically make you able to sell the idea to people outside that team. And that is something that I do coach a lot of our seniors on specifically.
On selling the idea?
Yeah. It also happens to be something I'm particularly good at, which is probably why I end up doing that. So there is a bit of a bias. But yeah, that's the seniors tend to struggle more with that than making plans for their teams and getting them to a better quality strategy. It's more about managing up when they're already experts. Whereas with the juniors, it's more about what's my position? How do I get my team on board? How do we move forwards? How do we pick the right experiments to run? It's more those kind of things, I find.
Okay, so are we talking about kind of advocacy? So supporting the quality process across the whole team or project, and you're suggesting that seniors potentially find that part of the role the hardest in your experience?
Yeah, and it's things also like aligning with the architecture, getting your plans to work across teams, perhaps. You want the senior quality engineers to start thinking a bit more on larger processes, on more the company architecture decisions that were made, and to both advocate for themselves and their team within that structure, as well as navigate it effectively. And that goes beyond a single team and helping them with their quality practices. And that's where I expect seniors to grow too, especially if they have this ambition to continue into the quality coach role. That's what I want to see them start doing.
Okay. So can we talk a little bit about kind of advocacy then? Because definitely from speaking to all three of you prior to the session about coaching, that was something that you mentioned as being kind of important, being there to advocate and support for your area for quality. So can we kind of talk about perhaps some techniques of how you go about doing that? Vernon, can I put you on the spot there?
What? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, repeat the question. So when I spoke to you prior to the session, and what we've just been talking about with Sana there is supporting. So in her case, she was mentioning seniors in advocating for the quality process across the business to reach whatever the end goal is, whatever products or service that you're trying to develop. So as a coach, how do you go about supporting the team in advocating for what they're doing, not just doing a task, whatever that task might be?
Hey, so I I don't know. So I'm a bit biased at the moment. So I'm looking. This is going to sound so weird, but I'm trying to learn about business and entrepreneurship at the moment, and a lot of that is based around, or at least the things that are resonating for me are around understanding the problem of the people that you're trying to serve a lot, like really trying to understand that
Yeah.
point of view. And I think we're all nerds, right? We're all excited about technology and we find it really interesting. And that old adage around nobody wants a drill, they want a hole in the wall is the thing that springs to mind. Because I have absolutely been guilty of trying to tell people up the food chain from me how wonderful this drill is. This drill is absolutely incredible. We've got titanium drill bits and they've got diamond heads at the, and it's got this many revolutions per minute. And it's so wonderfully light. And, like, no one cares. They're like, hey man, I'm just trying to put a hole in this wall. Like that's what I'm trying to hang up this TV. How are you going to help me put this TV on the wall? And so bringing it back to your question, it's not talking about how wonderful your defect predictinator 2024 version 7 is. It's around, well, why are we even doing this testing? Like, what problems have you got in production? Like, what do you even care about? And then to Sana's point, framing it in a way that they get interested and excited about. It's almost like the art of software development without talking about software development. Like, the first rule of quality coaching is to not talk about quality coaching, almost. So that is what I think.
So my point of view is that to Vernon's point there, they're not interested in the drill, they're interested in the hole. And I like to use this analogy where, when you're buying a house, you're not looking at, are the foundations there? It's a given that the foundations are there. You'd hope so anyway. But you're looking at how many bedrooms it has and how many bathrooms it's got, that kind of thing. And what I want to get teams into the habit of is like laying those foundations down. And that's where the coaching comes in. It's like, we need to make sure that we have the right foundations, that this software is sound in terms of we can hand this off to another team, or we put the right contracts in place so that another team can develop against it, that kind of thing. And I think that is as an industry, we have this bizarre thing where we, it's changing now, obviously, but for a lot of years, it's been a case of we write the feature, the functional part, and then we try and test afterwards to see that it works, rather than going, right, let's put the foundations in place so we know that this is in a good place and it's safe. So my advocacy there, I've had trouble with the word advocacy in the past in terms of selling that to the business. I've had much more success with coach. But I'm trying to get teams to work in a way that is, they have less headaches going forward, and that their house is structurally sound, if that makes sense. Great analogy.
Okay, well, you just said something there, Chris, and I'm looking at the questions and comments coming in. So let's try and make it quite interactive. So we've got Andy Armstrong, who's watched along. So thanks for your question, Andy. He said, "Why coach and not advocate, architect, specialist, advisor, or another title, i.e., not senior expert learner?" So, Chris, you just mentioned there you had problems with the use of the word advocate and coach. You felt worked better. Can you give us an idea of why?
Well, I'll give you a current situation that I'm in right now. So at the co-op, we have quality coaches. We don't have quality engineers, and it's explicit in the sort of job expectations that we don't test. We're not there to test things for other people. We're there to help the team make good decisions themselves, and test as a team rather than it be a siloed approach. In the past, I've had, we tried to reframe the QA role so rather than a quality analyst, to be a quality advocate. And I found with senior stakeholders that they don't want an advocate. They want a product that works. So back to Vernon's point there, they don't want an incredible drill. They want a hole that fulfills a purpose. So I found that the language there in terms of changing it to quality advocate just didn't work for our senior stakeholders. That wasn't a co-op, by the way. That was a previous company, but I'm finding much more success with the quality coach role. It sets an expectation. You're not there to necessarily write tests or perform tests. You're there to work with the team so that the team are taking care of those things.
Okay. Yeah, it goes back slightly potentially to Vernon's point, or a drill analogy. And again, me and Vernon were talking about that analogy prior to the session about potentially sometimes people don't see testing as a standalone thing as particularly sexy, or something that needs to be spoken about. Is actually about understanding what the business requirement is and baking testing in early enough so it's just an inherent part of the process. The next question, which is an interesting one, is what's the relationship between a coach and a head of quality? So more a question.
I don't know if anyone's lost Matt, but
Yeah, we lost Matt for a second there.
Yeah. Hopefully you can see me again. So we're just talking about the relationship between a coach and a head of quality. Sonny, do you want to start us off on that? How does that work in your current role and perhaps in previous?
So classical split, like a head of quality, will be much more about the processes that are in place and giving sort of the structure and the framework within which the teams and their quality engineers are going to be working together and setting some standards for what tooling and so forth. So like a head of quality, I would say, makes a very strategic plan for an organization, how to move quality forwards across the organization. I would expect quality coaches, there is a massive difference in how they operate and where they operate. In general, if you're thinking a quality coach across a couple of teams, then I would say they will have a specific set of missions that they will then discuss with the head of quality. So how to align again with that strategy while also advocating for the different team needs. Then I think also you can expect some level of quality advocacy with the quality engineers within the teams, and hopefully you're coaching that into them as well. And you're doing all these three things simultaneously. So the head of quality will be the one setting a company-wide strategy, also managing the politics around that, but then the execution of it and the coaching, that practice and those sets of processes into the actual teams will come through a quality coach and through a quality engineer within a team, or engineers, or even the engineers themselves. So it's layered that way. And I think that's the most classical way to look at it. The titles, I would agree, vary a lot, like what each of those is called. I've also seen a lot of very creative approaches for quality coaches to sort of set parameters and also make it visible in HR cycles. Like, what is it that I'm actually doing? I'm talking to people all day and I'm doing things, but what is it that I'm actually effectuating? And finding ways to measure that. I've seen a lot of very creative approaches to it, but it's very clear we're still working it out, like where the standards for that role are going to be set. So it's not cut and dry. And I think a head of quality will still be setting very different role descriptions for a quality coach role per organization. And I think that goes to Chris's point, how they're doing it at Co-op. This title didn't work within this context. We couldn't get this sold. Whereas a different kind of role or title with a different set of deliverables might work. And that, I think, is where the head of quality really comes in. Define that position. How does it show its effectiveness? How do you then maybe set some points for development and career growth as well? But it's very, very new. And I'm seeing lots of different answers to that question.
Yeah. Okay, perhaps we'll get a couple of different ones now. Vernon, how do you see it in your experience, that relationship?
Not too dissimilar to what Simon just said, to be honest. I feel like I feel like it's much more of a people-focused role on the quality coach side of things. Which is not to say that a head of quality is like humans be gone. It's just the focus is different. So a head of quality, I think Sana nailed it. It's the strategic side and the political side and the who is ultimately accountable for this stuff. It's you, the head of quality, and then the coach is, and this is biased by my understanding and my perception of what coaching is. I would see the coach as the person who's going to help the individuals and the teams that they are part of upskill and implement the thing and learn what it is that they need to learn and create their own plans and figure all that stuff out. So it's more of an enablement role. I'm going to enable these humans to acquire some skills and work differently. And then on the head of quality side, they're the people who are like defending the team from the craziness from up above and promoting what they're doing and, you know, advocating for budget for things and all that. But really across the whole org in that head of role. So, yeah.
Okay. So you said upskill, implement, learn, enable. What about deliver as well? So I mean, I asked the previous question about.
Again, I don't want to sound like a cop out, but Sana, again, it's like you don't even know what the answer is, and I'm trying to find out. Like, so coaching is not a new thing, so they must know some stuff over there in that very specific coaching industry, if you like. One thing that I'm pretty sure of is that it will be more qualitative in nature, and I think that's going to be part of the problem because so my understanding of what coaching is that if I'm one-to-one coaching you, Matt, I am not responsible for the success of the session. You are. That is an impossibly difficult sell in an organization. Hey, man, what are you responsible for? Nothing to do with me, man. It's all on you. I don't know what's going on. Like, so you got to figure out how to position that properly.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't get you fired. So turning that intangible qualitative stuff into something quantitative and more tangible, that's the trick. And Sana's right. I haven't seen a consistent answer bubble up in all the places that this conversation is happening yet. So if you got answers, like, hit all four of us up, please, because we would love to know. If you're in chat.
If I can give.
Well,
go on.
If I can point to a resource, Elizabeth Zagroba's blog does have quite a few pointers on how she maps out the work that she does. So I would definitely recommend reading those because she has that same floating role across teams, and she has blogged about how to map kind of what is it that Elizabeth does, kind of, and answer that question for her higher ups. So I would recommend that as a read. Personally, I find that I still, because I am a consultant, what still helps is that classical move of when you've just started, define expectations and the role. So that I would recommend to anyone that is picking up quality coaching. What is it you expect? Do you understand that I am coaching? So that I can only get as far as the team takes it on board. But you could still then identify, well, here's stuff that would help me get the team on board. Like, these are things that you can help me with, be more effective as a coach. Those things are measurable and you can define them. And I think there are points that can be made and that can be clarified to sort of get on the business side of things and quantify it. It doesn't have to go crazy. It will stay qualitative, I think, but it can be done. It just takes a lot of effort at this point because it's so non-standard.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue you'll see across the industry, industries. One thing I've pointed out in the past in a talk was around the output from teams being focused on, often being on Jira cards and velocity, which, you know, are important supporting factors, but ultimately is the value for the customer at the end of the day, whatever that customer is. And I think you can measure the impact of a coach. But again, it's not going to be directly what that coach does. It's what the team's output is from their work with the coach, if that makes sense. I could use a football analogy, but I won't. I don't want to alienate anyone who doesn't like soccer. But again, I think there is a fundamental issue with a huge amount of companies is that they're measuring against the wrong things. That ultimately, you know, companies should be looking at their bottom line and their ability to deliver at pace. And I think often we look at the ability to deliver at pace and not really, is this actually having the impact we want in terms of bottom line or customer satisfaction, that kind of thing. And if there is, the conversation's not happening. It's not connected enough. So as a quality coach, that's something that I always try and bring things back to. It's like, well, why are we doing this? What are we trying to affect? What's the result we're trying to aim for?
Okay. And do you want to just, Chris, if you can just sort of talk about, because I appreciate it works differently in all different structures, and again, you've described the quality engineers as quality coaches within your organisation. So, with the sort of head of quality position, how can we say, like, traditionally, or how do you see that interacting with the role of a quality coach?
So my experience is probably quite different to a few people. So my last head of quality role was to turn quality engineers into quality coaches. And there's one in the chat, actually. Lee Marshall's in the chat. He was one of my people. So my role as head of was to share that new role and what that new role meant for teams, with heads of, to do, present of to engineering as a whole, to try and change their impression of what quality is and what the quality roles within the company were there to do. As you can imagine, that's quite a big change for people's mindsets, and it was difficult. And then for me, it was supporting people in that transition. So some people I hired in as quality coaches. So Lee was one of them. But there were people already at the company that they hadn't performed that role before. So it was quite different for them. And they needed help with that transition and how that new role looked to them. So a lot of it was basically putting out a roadmap for them to, it wasn't going to change overnight. There was never going to be a big bang, because I don't like that kind of thing. It's too much chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a roadmap for both the organization and those individuals to transform.
Okay. So before we go into talk about, go and look at some of these questions that are coming, so there have been loads. I want to just, if we can, talk about what you see as the future of this role. I think Sonny mentioned it's still kind of early stages for it as a concept, and adoption is increasing, but still, it's not hugely common across the industry yet. When in the introduction I mentioned that as a proportion of roles in quality engineering, we are probably seeing less kind of heads of quality, with other people within tech teams managing the work of the quality engineer. So do you think we're likely to see more organizations adopt a coaching model? Sonny, can I start with you?
Just purely from our consultancy side, I would say yes, because I think 5 years ago we started out with roughly 4 agile quality coaches, as the role is formally known in our company. We now have between 30 and 40. So we are seeing that department now stand on its own 2 feet and finding a good to market position. But that's just from the economic side. I think there's still so many varying levels of maturity in terms of quality engineering within companies, from governmental to startup. Yes, it will transition, but it'll go in these bursts. Like we've seen all these different trends come and go. So companies will buy full in, realize maybe they've overshot, adjust back, and find a balance. So the rule will be there where it makes sense. And by then, I think it will get very defined and clear what it is you expect the quality coach to do and what will be expected to be achieved. But it is right now, I would say we are, as I like to say, in the muddle of things. It's coming, it's there, it's definitely getting there more and more. We are selling it very clearly, but not to everyone and not to lots of companies. I still classically get hired in test managers or head of quality roles more than I get requests for agile quality coaching roles, which would have the same span of influence. So I think it will transition, but I'm not sure where it will end up. I don't think it will be the right answer for all companies to do it in this way. That's I think, too much of a utopia.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, we're still struggling with agile in most places, aren't we? So something as modern as quality coaching is always going to be a difficult one. And to your point there, it's all about the context, isn't it? So some industries just won't be ready for 10, 20 years or something. You know, they just are so far away from it. It's interesting that there's a lot of companies, there was a trend where companies just did away with quality engineers altogether. Because they heard Facebook didn't have any QA. So they followed suit, kind of thing. And I think, to me, a quality coach can be a happy medium between, the army of quality engineers and having no quality engineers. They're there literally to make sure the engineers are baking the quality in and taking care of business, rather than the sort of more traditional develop it, then test it.
Yeah, and then maybe a bit of an alternative idea, but something I think is part of the trend. I think we also have a lack of what we would call a technical coach role within teams. So that's something that, for instance, Emily Bash advocates for a lot, to have people coaching on engineering skills. And that is a part of the gap that the agile quality coaches are filling, which is, upskilling on the technical aspects of our quality engineering jobs. So I think that's part of the trend as well. We know we want these teams to start doing these things, but they also need the technical coaching to learn and to get to that level, so that quality engineering gets embedded within their teams. So there's a bit of that as well, that we're finding an overlap with what you could call a technical coach.
Okay. Vernon, your crystal ball, what do you envisage for the role of a coach or quality coach moving forward?
Crystal ball. If I had a crystal ball,
Tough, isn't it?
I'd be on a beach right now, man.
It's a tough question.
I think you will see less heads of, purely because it feels like everybody's trying to flatten all the structures out everywhere, and that feels like another, obvious role to subsume into something else. But my feelings about that, generally speaking, are it's like me saying, hey Matt, do you have a dedicated chef in your family home? And you go, no. So, well, how on earth are you doing any cooking then? There's no dedicated chef. What's going on? And so sometimes it would make sense to have that person in that role, and sometimes it wouldn't, and trying to figure out which situations require which is important. Like, the first thing that springs to mind for me is maybe the size of the organization might require a head of. And I think the other two folks were talking about this other aspect, which is how, I want the right word is, sophisticated. I don't want it, that sounds a bit judgy, right? But a bit like, how used are you to taking on extra responsibilities, or how hierarchical or old school are you? And then it might make more sense there for political reasons, which we shouldn't poo-poo and just dismiss because we don't like them. Like, that stuff is real, and sometimes it needs to be addressed head on. So yeah, that said, I do think it's going to go away over the course of time, and it will just, the things that are head of quality looked after will eventually, some parts of it will appear in this role, and some parts of it will appear in another one, and so on and so on.
In my experience,
there's an interesting cultural aspect, if I could add that, that allows quality coaching to either thrive or not, because there is a rule-based thing, whereas in a culture where you're very much about following rules, then it's about, if there are no rules for this thing that we need to do, then obviously we can't do it, because there's no rule in our company that says do it this way. But then there are companies that will have these rules, but they'll have the culture of, well, the rules are there, but if there's no rule, then obviously it's freedom, and it means I can do whatever. experiment I need to do. And that culture, both companies will have rules, but the one culture will say, if there's no rule for this thing, then obviously we can't do it. The other culture will say, if there's no rule for this thing, then obviously we can, because it's open ground. And the quality coach, I think in that second one, where that is perceived as freedom, does way better than in a company culture where having no rules means don't do it. So it ties into risk acceptance, of course, as well. But I think those really matter in terms of company culture and that role and its success.
That's interesting, man.
That's some of my thought process on that.
Yeah,
I do
like
think
that.
it ties into its success, though. I really do.
It's quite an interesting one there, is that I've seen the head of quality role fail because it's separate to head of engineering. And really, like, the practices that you want to see from quality coaches, like the results from a quality coach, are, you know, a lot of it's done by engineers. And having this message come from a head of quality is just, the message just doesn't land as well, and it's still keeping that that level of separation, or that silo between disciplines that just isn't helpful.
Which isn't necessarily helpful. Yeah. Yes, I mean, I don't know the stats on it, but when you look at the sort of startup community, tech startup community, and you sort of look at maybe a sub 50-person business, then it wouldn't be uncommon at all for them not to have a head of quality. In fact, you might potentially be surprised if they do have one. So you can see, albeit I'm not backing this up with data, which isn't helpful, but you can see from looking at those sort of organizations that is the kind of way things are going. I think Werner said about, it does depend on company size, which is definitely true. But no, that in itself is a really interesting debate, and I'm glad we've touched on that, because it's something that a lot of people talk to me about, particularly job seekers. The future of testing and where they envisage the role of head of quality to be at now and where it's going. So thank you. We've got loads of great questions. I'm going to try and dive into them to try and get through as many as we can. So thanks everyone who's watching, for sending these in. It's really appreciated. I'm going to start with this one because I think it's great. And we'll probably know Tony. So Tony said, are we at the point where coaches are being asked to tell people or teams what to do rather than coach? Does anyone want to pick that one up?
Yes, I think.
Maturity, doesn't it?
Sana, was it you that talked about positioning yourself at the start? That's when you don't do this, when you don't do that, this is what happens.
I think what the coaching mentality is to meet the people and the team where they're at. I mean, that just unequivocally, that's the only thing you can do, and then coach from there. But like telling people and teams what to do, I think is a bit too extreme, but not setting a North Star and not setting an ambition where you want the team and why you're coming in to do the coaching, not setting that expectation, I think is also a mistake. So it's not so much telling them what to do as to for sure bring along an aspiration that is aligned with the goals. And, a team can bring input, they can bring options. There are many ways to get to a certain goal that you've set. But I think a clear expectation, you're here, we need you to get there. And whichever route you follow will be a journey you undertake with your coach. But some kind of aspirational, like, we need you to get here, is necessary. And it might be perceived as telling them what to do, because you are telling them, like, we think you need this coaching. If you have the luxury of working at a company where the only teams that get coached are the ones that invite a coach in, I think that would be awesome. I haven't seen that. That would be even more perfect. But even then, I would want to goal set with that team so that we know where we want to get to. And that might be perceived as telling them what to do, but without that, I do think you need some kind of goal.
Yeah, I think what this question and your reply is making me think is that I have been guilty of, when I get into a real, like, I am coaching now, trying to get my opinion out of me is like getting the blood out of a stone. And that isn't bad. Like, your opinion isn't bad. So when I look at this question, I think to myself, if the expectation is that I'm always telling, then we're going to have a problem. But then it isn't, you know, to Sana's point, like, it isn't very useful to never tell anybody anything and never share your opinion about anything. Because you've probably arrived in that role with a certain set of experiences and a certain set of skills and opinions that would be helpful to get people unstuck. And that really is the point. The point isn't to stick to some very idealized, pure version of what coaching is. The point is to support the team.
Yeah.
And I am now going to do what Chris did and not use a football analogy and stop talking.
Back to what I said earlier about the sometimes you have to step away from being a coach and be a mentor for the team. Within co-op, again, we don't have quality engineers, so often you work with a team that doesn't necessarily have any testing experience, so they'll trying to coach something out of them where they've got no idea where to go can be really difficult. So you might feed them, like I did a session recently on load testing and performance testing. The team had no experience, so I had to lean on my own experience and make suggestions and suggest trials and that kind of thing. So it's not exactly telling them what to do, but it's feeding them enough information that they can get somewhere along that journey.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question, Tony. Another great one here. It's let's see what you think of this. So, in your view as a quality coach, if you're floating across multiple teams, there is no dependency on you. More you make the team self-sustainable, they need you less. Will this make senior stakeholders use budget for more critical roles over coach roles? And if so, how do you deal with this? It's a great question. I think it's probably putting you on the spot slightly, so apologies. But I'd love to get your take on it, because I kind of see where she's coming from. But what are your thoughts?
Like, from a personal perspective, I think this is the ideal way to see the role. I would love to always put myself out of a job. I haven't had that experience. You always uncover more problems once you solve others. I think that's one of the Jerry Weinberg sayings as well. It's like every problem you solve uncovers 3 more. So I don't think the work ever really ends. There's always something more to optimize. But does it get budget taken away? Yes, potentially it can, I think. I haven't had the experience, though. It hasn't happened.
Okay. Anyone else want to tackle that? Any thoughts?
I can echo a little bit in terms of, once you find yourself in those roles, there's always more to uncover and more problems to solve with the team. With regards to that last point about will this make senior stakeholders use budget for more critical roles? You'll always see when there's a crunch, this type of role, like even QA in itself, or any type of quality role, are the ones that often suffer in terms of redundancies and that kind of thing. I don't think that will necessarily change, because stakeholders there's a lack of education in terms of what quality brings to an organization, I think. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we need to make, in your role as a quality coach, you need to make it critical make it seen as a critical role for others. And I think a lot of that comes down to, if your team, a little bit like Nanny McPhee, when your team want you but don't need you, you're really important to the organization.
Okay.
My take on it is,
it's a quality film.
So you didn't think you were going to get film recommendations, did you, folks? Awesome.
No, there we go.
So I think there's a balance. I think there's in a purely theoretical and idealized point of view, yes, the point is to put yourself out of a job, because then the team doesn't need you. But that there is a real risk that you will convince the people who control the budget that you are not necessary. So I think it's a mixture. I think the way you handle it is, in order to make, you've heard Chris and Sana say this, in order to make that role go away, you would have to solve a lot of problems. And the ability to solve problems is very valuable to any organization on the face of God's green earth. So the challenge then becomes, how do you describe and promote and share that value? I think that's the challenge. And it's easy for a bunch of us, you know, the three of us are super duper experienced, I guess. We've been doing it for a long time. So, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, because it's easier for us to say that, right? But I think you're right, Deepika, the risk is there. So really what I'm trying to say is be really deliberate about the problems that you're solving, like consistently, almost like build in public and share. Oh, the team did this. I helped the team do this. This happened, and here's how I contributed. Whether that's with your immediate line manager or with the organization at large, I think it's about doing both. Because usually organizations, again, silly example, but you know what they tend not to do is say, well, Vern, you've been here for 5 years, just, you know, sat around at your desk looking handsome and wonderful. So I'm going to give you this interesting project to do. What they'll probably do is say, wow, Deepika, you've solved this problem and that problem and the other problem. And we've got this really super duper crypto, AI, machine learning, self-driving project coming up. And we need some, and we don't know what we're doing. So you seem to solve all the problems. So would you be interested? Like that? That's what I'm aiming for with this whole put yourself out of a job, is just look like ultimate problem solver central, and then you can parlay that into something cool.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for answering that one. Not that easy, really. Let's see. It wasn't, was it? We've got loads of questions. Let me see what we can get through. So we've got Shaimala. So thank you for the question. What is the role of a quality coach in the path to live? Like after the feature is testing complete? We've spoken about the role of the coach and their involvement in delivering things. Does anyone want to give a view on this?
It's almost equivalent to asking, like, what is the team's role anymore after the testing is complete? And that'll really be an organizational structure. But let's assume for now we're talking about a team on the development side of like a project that doesn't maybe have responsibilities in production, so more dev than DevOps. In that case, there is a clear delineation when you have that transition to production. You, of course, want to get some feedback loops back in on incidents and issues. So that might be something to coach on. If you're talking DevOps teams, obviously you still have a full role as a quality coach to look into any ops improvements that might be able to be done by the team. So I would ask, is this a dev team or an ops team? And if either way, that's where your coaching role also towards the team, you can have that discussion. Maybe if it's a dev team and they're ready to take on ops responsibilities, that's something you can have a conversation with them on. That's another interesting thing, I think, as a quality coach that you can broach. Those are good conversations to have in this case. So it will depend on the team that you're supporting is, in fact, my answer.
Okay. I'll just go on.
Oh no, go on, Matt. Go on.
I was go give your answer, because I was going to shoot onto another question, but go on, far away.
This is where I lean into the quality side of the job title, and your interest in quality does not stop because the testing is complete. To Sana's point, there are lots of things that can impact the quality. So maybe there's some things to do in production that we need to do in order to make sure that we have success for the business and for the customers that we're serving. So whatever the answer to that question is, that's what we're doing.
Good addition, thanks.
I'll just put one more question up, which should have time for, from Philippa. Do you feel squads within value streams need both quality coaches and quality engineers?
Well, some do and some don't, right? So Chris, you want to take that one on because it is a mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting one. I'm kind of the opinion that you don't need both, and that a mature team just needs a quality coach, and eventually might not even need that. But I also recognise that lots of teams are in transition, and that within organisations, like the quality engineers bring a very specific set of expertise, right? So it depends. I'm sorry, but it depends.
Yeah, there's something that I've heard people talk about more and more over the past couple of years, and I think it's because of Team Topologies by Matthew Skelton. Is it Manuel Pace? I'll never know if I'm saying his name right. But it's this concept of cognitive load, right? So we are asking people in our delivery teams to learn and be expert in more and more and more things. And there's only so many hours in the day. There is an upper limit to that. And so one way you might answer that question is to figure out where are we pushing the boundaries of that cognitive load? It's like we're asking the team to understand the front end, understand the back end, understand the platform, understand testing, understand quality, manage upwards, learn about leadership, which includes coaching and sometimes telling and sometimes shit. Like, that's a lot of shit, pardon my French. So maybe it would make sense to draw the line somewhere. And so it can make sense to kind of say, oh, well, we'll still have quality engineers. I've got a friend of mine who he's one of the most incredible people I worked with. He's basically a developer that really loves testing. That's how I always think about him. But to another developer, he would look like a developer. But what he's focused on, you could draw a boundary around it and say you're a quality engineer. And so it's a bit hand wavy, but it does depend. And cognitive load might help you figure out the answer to that question.
Yeah, what skills?
We'll try and get some links and stuff in the comments afterwards of some of the stuff you've suggested. So a couple of books and a couple of blogs, which we'll try and get in there. We are now at 1 o'clock, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. It does seem that we could probably end up talking for a lot longer because there's some other great questions. And
what happens to those
panel
What happens to those questions? Do they still exist?
What happens to them? They still exist. Of course you can.
Okay.
Of course you can. So the event will be, and this leads into the next point, so thank you, Bernard. So the event will be stay live on LinkedIn for anyone who wants to watch it via the same link as before, and then within 24 hours the event will also be on our YouTube channel, so you can catch it on there. All the comments and questions that have come in, you can have a look back on in the link. And if the panel are so inclined, then they can absolutely go back and try and answer some of those questions afterwards. But thank you to the three of you. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been really good, really enjoyable.
Very welcome.
Loved having you on, so thank you.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
If you can stick around for just a couple of minutes, I'll click off live and then we can have a brief chat. But thanks everyone for joining us today. We have got another event coming up in June, which will be announced shortly.
Cheers, folks.
Thanks all. Bye.